I'd been sitting in the same corner of the laundromat for weeks, always the same time, Sunday mornings, when it was mostly empty except for the hum of machines. I liked the quiet. Nobody asking me what I was doing with my life. Nobody reminding me I was 23 and still hadn't figured out what I wanted. I always noticed her before she noticed me. Mid-40s, dark hair pulled back, sleeves rolled up, like she didn't care about being seen but somehow made you look twice. She was the kind of person who folded her clothes like she had nowhere else to be, deliberate, patient. That morning, she caught me staring longer than usual. "Are you timing the spin cycle, or is it me you're worried about?" she said, not looking up from her stack of towels. I fumbled with my phone. "Neither. Just, waiting." Her smile was quick, almost hidden, but it left me unsettled. I bent down to retie my sneakers even though the knot was fine. When she finally walked past me toward the vending machine, I noticed her glance, brief, testing, like she was deciding if I'd speak again. I didn't. I just pressed my thumb against the side of my phone, checking a notification that wasn't there. The second time, a week later, she remembered me. "You again," she said, carrying a small basket, a thermos tucked under her arm. "Same machine, same seat." I shrugged. Creature of habit. She poured coffee into the plastic lid and set it on the folding table beside her. "You're too young to already be repeating yourself." The line should have sounded sharp, but the way she said it, it felt like she was letting me in on something. I found myself staring at her hands, the way she flicked her thumb against the rim of the cup, how her nails were short, clean. I don't know why that detail stuck. She noticed. Of course she noticed. "You want some?" she asked, lifting the thermos a little. I shook my head, though my throat was dry. "No, I'm good." "You don't even know what it is," she said, then took a slow sip, eyes holding mine for a second too long. I laughed quietly, more at myself than anything. "Guess I don't. I had this habit lately. Drafting messages I never sent. Notes in my phone that started with, 'Hey, I was wondering,' and ended with nothing. I'd type them, stare, and then delete. That same hesitation followed me every time I sat across from her. We never talked long, but the silences felt heavier than the words. One night, folding a t-shirt that wasn't even mine, I caught myself wondering what her apartment looked like. Whether she had music playing, or if she liked it quiet. The thought unsettled me enough to shove the shirt into my bag without folding it. It was the third Sunday when it shifted. I dropped a sock, bent to pick it up, and nearly bumped into her as she stepped closer. We froze, close enough that I caught the faint scent of her shampoo, something clean, simple. "I shouldn't be here," I muttered, meaning more than just the laundromat. She tilted her head, studying me like she wasn't sure if I meant it. Then she smiled, soft but certain. "That's why you should." She turned back to her machine, like nothing had been said, like she hadn't just lodged something in my chest I wasn't ready for. I walked home with damp clothes stuffed carelessly in my bag, phone buzzing once in my pocket. A message lit the screen. "Next Sunday, don't sit in the corner." The following Sunday, I didn't take my usual corner. I sat 2 machines over, close enough that she noticed. Her eyes flicked toward me when she walked in, and a half-smile crossed her face, like she'd been expecting me to listen. "You followed instructions," she said, setting her basket down. I didn't know if it was a joke, I answered. But when she poured coffee from her thermos again, she slid the lid toward me without looking up. "Try it before you say no this time." I did. Too hot, too bitter, but it felt like something more than coffee passed between us. We ended up sitting across from each other while her load spun. She asked small questions, what I studied before I quit, whether I liked living in the building. Her own answers were short, as if she wasn't used to being asked. "Divorced," she said casually, like she was reporting the weather. "No kids at home. Just her and a lot of quiet." She didn't look at me when she said that last part, but her fingers tapped the edge of the table like she was waiting for something. I almost told her about my nights, how I scroll through names in my phone, hovering over people I don't actually want to text. How sometimes I walk down to the corner store just to hear another human voice. Instead, I folded a t-shirt twice before realizing it was already folded. "Your girlfriend doesn't help with laundry?" she asked, dry. I shook my head. "No girlfriend." She raised an eyebrow. "At your age?" "Unlikely." I smirked, though it felt thin. "Maybe I'm older than I look." That made her laugh. Quiet, but real. The kind that made her cover her mouth like she hadn't meant to let it out. When the machine beeped, she leaned over to pull out her clothes. A shirt slipped to the floor. I bent at the same time she did, my hand brushing the back of hers before I snatched the fabric up. It was nothing. Just a touch. But she froze, looking at me like the moment had extended longer than it should have. "Thanks," she said finally, folding the shirt without meeting my eyes. I sat back, pulse stupidly loud in my ears, pretending to check my phone. In the black reflection of the screen, I saw her watching me. Not openly, just a glance, soft, assessing, like she was trying to decide something about me that I couldn't name. When I finally looked up, she smiled again. Not wide. Not playful. Just, knowing. And for some reason, it felt like I'd crossed into something I couldn't step back from. By the fourth Sunday, I almost didn't go. I told myself it was because I had too much work, but really, I didn't trust what was happening between us. Still, I found myself walking there with my laundry bag slung over my shoulder like always. She was already there, leaning against the machine, scrolling through her phone. When she saw me, her posture shifted, just slightly straighter, a small smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "You almost didn't come," she said, like she'd read my hesitation. I shrugged. "Busy week." She studied me a beat longer than necessary, then nodded, letting it drop. But something in her silence made me want to fill it. We settled into our routine, her coffee, my half-smile, the quiet folding of clothes. Except this time, she asked me about my family. A casual question, but my throat tightened. I told her the truth, we weren't close, not in the way people imagine families should be. She listened, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. When it was her turn, she admitted she hated Sundays. Said they reminded her of when her husband used to come home late, smelling of someone else's perfume. She said it flatly, but her hands wouldn't stop smoothing the same folded towel. The words hung between us. I wanted to reach across the table, but instead I fiddled with a loose thread on my sleeve. "Sorry," I muttered. "Don't be." She gave a small laugh, dry but not bitter. "I'm the one who said it." That was when the interruption came. The door swung open and one of my neighbors stepped in, a guy I knew vaguely from the third floor. He nodded at me, then at her, eyebrows raised like he was piecing something together. I felt myself stiffen. She noticed, because her voice went lighter, brisker. "You forgot a sock again," she teased, tossing one in my direction like nothing was unusual. The neighbor chuckled, shook his head, and left with a Coke from the vending machine. But the air didn't quite settle after that. She was quieter. More careful. When her machine finally clicked open, she bent to lift the basket. The weight made her pause, and without thinking, I reached over to help. Our hands brushed again, this time lingering just a fraction longer. She looked up at me. Too close. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Only silence, charged and impossible. Her gaze flicked down to my lips, then back to my eyes. For one suspended second, the whole room felt still, the hum of machines, the fluorescent buzz, even the sound of my own breathing. Then she stepped back. Just a small, deliberate shift, as if to reset the distance. "You should go," she said softly. I nodded, though my body resisted moving. Outside, the air felt colder than it should have. My phone buzzed with another unsent draft waiting to be deleted. And in the reflection of the laundromat's window, I swore I saw her watching me leave. The laundromat felt hollow without her. Same humming machines, same harsh lights, but no voice teasing me about my socks or offering bitter coffee in a plastic lid. I sat through 2 cycles, watching the door like an idiot, until I gave up and walked home with my laundry half wet. By the 3rd missed week, I convinced myself it was better this way. Whatever line we were balancing on had been too thin, too risky. She'd realized it, and she was protecting us both. And then, on a Tuesday of all days, I found her outside the building, sitting on the low brick wall with a paper bag of groceries at her side. Skipping laundry? I asked before I could stop myself. She looked up, eyes tired but softer than I remembered. Trying to change the pattern. I sat down beside her, more careful than casual. The bag between us smelled faintly of oranges. Thought maybe you were avoiding me, I said. Her lips curved, but it wasn't quite a smile. Maybe I was. For a while, we just sat. She flicked at the corner of the grocery receipt poking from the bag. I dug at a crack in the sidewalk with the tip of my shoe. Finally, she exhaled. It's not that I don't like talking to you. I do. Maybe too much. The honesty startled me. I turned, but she was staring ahead at the streetlight buzzing faintly in the dusk. You're what, 23? She asked. I nodded. She gave a low laugh. My son's 22. Lives in Portland. You remind me of him sometimes. And that, she stopped, shaking her head, as if even naming it crossed a line. I wanted to say something that made sense, but my throat tightened. I don't see you that way, I blurted instead, then winced at how clumsy it sounded. Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp but searching. Then how do you see me? I opened my mouth. Closed it. Every answer felt dangerous. Too much or not enough. Finally, like someone I don't want to stop running into. The silence after that was heavy but not hostile. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, the light from the street lamp tracing her profile. For the first time, she looked her age to me, not older, not younger, just weathered, like she'd lived more seasons than I could count. Do you know what happens if we keep sitting like this? She asked quietly. My chest tightened. I think so. Her hand twitched against the grocery bag, like she was about to reach for me, or maybe push me away. I couldn't tell. We both turned slightly, caught in a moment where everything else fell out of frame, the hum of cars, the flicker of the street lamp, the sound of my own pulse. And then, just as the space between us narrowed, she pulled her hands back into her lap and looked away. Not tonight, she said. I nodded, though I hadn't asked. The oranges shifted in the bag between us, the faintest sound breaking the spell. The next Sunday, I didn't go. Not because I was busy. Not because I'd forgotten. I just didn't. I sat in my apartment, staring at the clock, listening for the faint hum of machines through the floor that I knew I couldn't actually hear. I told myself she'd notice. That she'd sit down at her table, look toward the corner, and realize I wasn't there. But maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she'd already decided not to. By late afternoon, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I walked down to the lobby, pretending to check the mail I already knew was empty. And there she was, coming in with a man. He was older, maybe late 50s. Dressed neatly, carrying a bottle of wine. She laughed at something he said, her hand brushing his arm in that casual, practiced way. I froze at the row of mailboxes, staring too long at the slot with my name. She noticed me. Of course she did. Her laugh faltered, just for a second. Then she recovered, gave a polite nod, and kept walking. The man didn't even glance my way. I couldn't stop replaying that moment. The way her smile looked different beside him, lighter, rehearsed, like she was fitting herself back into an old shape. That night, I typed out a message, "Was he your husband?" Deleted it. Typed, "I didn't mean to stare." Deleted that too. Finally, just, "Do you still go Sundays?" My thumb hovered over send until the screen dimmed. When I saw her next, it wasn't at the laundromat. It was in the stairwell. She was carrying groceries again, her expression tired. The man wasn't with her. "Hey," I said. My voice sounded too loud in the narrow space. She paused, adjusting the bags against her hip. "You weren't there this week." "I know." I hesitated. "Neither were you." Her eyes flicked to mine, something sharp, almost defensive, before softening. "I've been busy." I wanted to ask with who. I wanted to ask if he was back for good, if that night meant something, if I'd made her laugh at all compared to him. But the words lodged somewhere behind my teeth. Instead, I reached to take one of the bags. She let me, reluctantly. Our hands brushed again, but this time it didn't spark. It just felt weighted. At her door, she took the bag back and managed a smile. "Thanks." I nodded, waiting for something more. But she only added, "Good night," and slipped inside. The lock clicked softly. Back in my apartment, I stared at the empty corner where my laundry bag usually sat. I almost grabbed it, almost went back to the laundromat just to see if she'd follow. Instead, I sat down at the table, phone glowing in my hand. A message half-written, I should have knocked. But I didn't send it. The screen dimmed again, leaving me in the dark. It was late, after rain, the hallways of the building still damp from people tracking in water. I'd gone downstairs for the mail I didn't really need, and she was there, standing at her door, keys in hand, grocery bag at her feet. We both froze, as though caught doing something we shouldn't. "You always check your mail at midnight?" she asked, her voice low, carrying the tired edges of her day. "Sometimes." I shifted the bundle of envelopes in my hand. "You always shop this late?" She exhaled, almost a laugh. "Sometimes." For a moment, neither of us moved. The light above flickered once, buzzing faintly. "Here," I said, picking up her bag before she could. She didn't argue this time. I followed her into her apartment. It was smaller than I imagined. Neat, but lived in. A half-read book on the table, a sweater draped over a chair. The kitchen smelled faintly of oranges again. "Set it down there," she said, pointing to the counter. I did, but didn't step back. "Not right away." She leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching me like she was trying to decide if letting me in was already a mistake. "Why'd you stop coming?" she asked finally. I blinked. "Why'd you?" Her mouth tightened, then softened. "Because I was starting to look forward to it too much." The words landed heavy, quiet, like a confession disguised as a fact. I swallowed. "And that's a bad thing?" Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp, vulnerable. "You're young." "I'm not. I've already made mistakes I don't want to repeat." I leaned against the opposite counter, folding the envelopes in my hands, unfolding them again. "Maybe it doesn't have to be a mistake." For a second, silence. The rain ticked faintly against the window, as though the storm hadn't quite finished. She shook her head. "You don't understand what this would cost." "Then explain it to me." My voice cracked on the last word, too earnest. She stared at me, long enough I thought she'd send me out. Instead, she said, barely above a whisper, "I'm afraid." "Afraid of wanting this." "Afraid of you wanting it too, and then realizing later you shouldn't have." My chest ached. I wanted to close the distance, to reach for her hand resting on the counter. But I stayed where I was, pulse heavy in my ears. "I don't know what I'll want later," I admitted. "But I know what I want right now." Her eyes closed, just for a moment. When they opened, they softened, not surrender, not refusal. Just a fragile acceptance of being seen. Slowly, carefully, she reached over, her hand brushing the back of mine on the counter. The touch was barely there, but it grounded me, steadied the whole room. "Okay," she whispered. "No promises. No declarations. Just that one word." And somehow, it was enough. Time passed. Not a sudden leap, just the ordinary way it does, weeks blending into months, laundry cycles replaced by errands at odd hours, messages exchanged sparingly until it didn't feel strange to send them. We stopped pretending to only meet in the laundromat. Sometimes it was coffee in her kitchen before work, her thermos sitting between us. Sometimes it was me walking her groceries upstairs. Once, it was a park bench on a Saturday morning, both of us watching a jogger's dog chase squirrels until we laughed at the futility of it. She didn't call it love. Neither did I. It was something else, something steadier, earned in small increments. One evening, I came by with a chipped mug I'd found at a thrift shop. The glaze was cracked, the handle slightly crooked. I told her it reminded me of her coffee lid, always too hot, always slightly bitter. She laughed, soft, surprised. "You kept thinking about that?" "I never stopped." She placed the mug beside her book on the counter. "Then I guess I'll have to keep it." It felt like a promise, though neither of us said the word. Sometimes, I caught her looking at me with worry, like she was measuring the space between our ages, weighing what it might cost us later. I didn't push. Instead, I stayed. Folded my laundry at her table. Watched the rain slide down her kitchen window with her. Picked the oranges she always bought from the bag when they threatened to roll onto the floor. The moments stacked quietly, until the fear she carried seemed lighter. One Sunday morning, much later, we ended up at the laundromat again. Out of habit, maybe nostalgia. The same corner table, the same hum of machines. She poured coffee from her thermos into the lid and slid it toward me. "You're going to pretend you like it this time?" I took a sip, grimaced. "Not a chance." Her laugh filled the room, not covered this time, not restrained. Just hers. Life wasn't suddenly perfect. She still had nights she went quiet, lost in her past. I still had mornings where I wondered what exactly I was building. But it was better now, grounded, real, warm in a way I hadn't known I needed. We never talked about what we were supposed to be. Only what we were, two people who chose not to look away. That night, walking her back upstairs, I lingered at her door. She tilted her head, studying me the way she did that first day, as if she were deciding whether to let me stay. But she only said, "It's late. You should come in." And I did. The door shut behind us, the quiet settling not heavy this time, but certain. Later, when I think of how it began, I don't remember the machines or even my own hesitation. I remember her smile, small, knowing, when I'd said, "I shouldn't be here." And her answer that changed everything, "That's why you should."